Hello everyone, and welcome back to our bi-weekly report. This time around, we have big news, as we have moved house to a new server and with a new website look. We did this because our contract with our previous server host was expiring. We had a less than stellar experience with them and we decided to switch to another provider. Unfortunately, this decision came a bit late and the porting process led to quite a few problems, including broken articles and broken images. We are on our way to fixing these, and the articles should already be fine. After we have finished fixing the website, we'll be taking a better look at the style, as we know a lot of people are unsatisfied with that. However, the website will be staying as a single column, but the rest of the style will be subject to change. Another very important thing to note is that Tank Encyclopedia now has an SSL certificate. So, your interactions with the website will be more secure and Google will like us a little bit more. All in all, hang in there with us. We're getting this fixed. So what's new in the modeling world? Ryefield Model announced their upcoming 35th scale British Sherman VC Firefly. Italeri announced their 35th scale M1A2 Abrams Reeboks, including the crew. Tacom announced their 35th scale mouse V1 and V2 2-in-1 kit. T-Models released their updated version of the Steyr Schwer Schienenpanzerspielzeug in 35th scale with new and updated parts. Armada Hobby released two versions of the BTR-40 in 72nd scale. IBG Models released their updated version of the M1897 75mm field gun in 35th scale with new and updated parts. Panda Hobby has released their updated version of the Air Defense System 9K330 Tor in 35th scale with new and updated parts. W Model released an update of the 9A39 Buk Launcher Transloader in 72nd scale. Last but not least, Mini Art announced their Czechoslovak production T55 in 35th scale. Once again in gaming news, we'll be taking another look at the latest update for the Tank Cruise module of IL-2 Great Battle Simulation, which brings with it a series of visual upgrades for the KV-1s and the T-34 Mod 1943, a small number of improvements to the simulation, and a new big gun for the Soviet side. First, the visual upgrades. The interior and exterior of the KV-1s has received some love, with the addition of functional recoil indicators and a speedometer, which were previously missing from its visual model. Also, you can now see the batteries and panoramic sight cupola stopper on the vehicle, and the visual detail of armor plates above the tracks has been improved, along with a host of general improvements to the tank's interior detail and quality. Much like the KV, the T-34 has received a panoramic sight stopper, as well as visual improvements to the track modules and functionally its internal collision model, which should go some way to improving the damage calculations of the vehicle. Finally, for all tanks in the simulation, engine exhaust will now be visible while the engine is idle, as previously it would not be emitted from the tank when it was not in motion. For general improvements to the sim, a fifth voice has been added for the Soviet tankers, adding to the diversity of radio chatter, while the concussion effects upon vehicles following HE impacts has been tweaked to only trigger if the player or AI within the vehicle was actually wounded by the impact. This should prevent players from losing consciousness when strafed by aircraft with low-caliber HE weapons or hit by low-caliber AA emplacements, although such impacts can still damage the vehicle itself. Finally, the new vehicle added to the sim in Update 4.002 is the Su-122, sporting the largest player-controllable weapon in the entire simulation, and bringing with it a host of new opportunities and challenges for players on both sides of the ground war. The 122mm howitzer can be loaded with up to 40 rounds of either HE or heat ammunition, or a mixture thereof, allowing it to bring its firepower to bear against every target the Soviets can face, from an entrenched howitzer position to the armor of a Tiger. This comes at a cost, however, with a low shell velocity and slow rate of fire, making range finding and accurate shooting at long-distance engagements difficult, while the limited traverse of the casemate-mounted 122mm makes close-range engagements risky, as enemy vehicles may be able to simply flank your vehicle. If used well, the Su-122 will be sure to give the Soviet side some of the firepower they have been lacking to deal with the threat of the Tiger, but it will certainly take some skill to overcome the limitations of the vehicle and use it to its full potential. As always, more information can be found at the link in the description, which will take you to the IL-2 Sturmovik website's news segment on the latest update. Now, on to our new articles. First up, we have a French improvised light tank known as the AMX-US. This tank was born of efforts by France to modernize their aging M24 Chaffee tanks by taking the turret from said tanks and mounting them on the newer, domestically produced AMX-13s. France had about 1,250 M24s in its service, and it utilized these tanks in both the Algerian War and the First Indochina War. The AMX-13, developed in the late 1940s and produced in the early 1950s, was a lightly armored tank, yet it mounted a 75mm cannon on an oscillating turret, supported by an auto-loading system. In 1956, the French military first attempted to mount an oscillating turret on the Chaffee, but this was abandoned due to misgivings about the safety of such a mounting, and as such, the project was abandoned. Yet the inverse of this idea moved ahead, and the Chaffee turrets were mounted on the hulls of the AMX. The only needed modification was the addition of a collar to slightly raise the turret, and thus allow the Chaffee's turret basket to fit properly. Around 150 tanks were converted in 1960, and while in the French military, they only saw action in the war in Algeria. After the war, they were used as driver trainers until the 1980s, when they were retired as range targets or scrapped. Unfortunately, almost none survive to this day, besides the ones that are still out on the ranges. For our second article, we are featuring the Panzer IV/70A. After attempts to place a 7.5cm L70 gun in a Panzer IV turret failed, the Vomag Panzer IV-70V superstructure was used, and mounted on a standard Panzer IV chassis. The A version was taller and heavier than the V version, yet it was needed as a faster adaptation to get the L70 guns onto the battlefield. There were to be fewer modifications needed with the intention of speeding up production. The suspension, running gear, and engine compartment were all the same as on the Panzer IV, while the superstructure from the Panzer IV/70V was also kept mostly the same. There were, however, changes to the side armor and front armor, providing additional height in order to accommodate the fuel tanks that were normally underneath the turret, and to prevent barrel strikes on the ground if the gun wasn't secured by a travel lock. 278 of these conversions were performed, with a majority of these vehicles seeing service on the Eastern Front, while a few were also used on the Western Front. While they performed well against the vehicles they went up against, many were abandoned or destroyed by their crew due to a lack of fuel and spare parts, and they were never present in enough numbers to make a large impact on the outcome of battles. In addition, the size and weight of these vehicles made them easier targets for enemy gunners. Only one survives to this day at the Samur Tank Museum, still showing the battle damage it suffered at the hands of a Sherman. Other articles published include the McPhee Landship of 1914, the Guy light tank wheeled, the Nahul DL-43, and the Damag D2 Lilliput. That's all for this report. Make sure to follow our website. We'll be releasing new articles on the regular. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or Reddit. If you use Discord, there's a link to our community server in the description. And if you'd like to help us continue to develop and expand, consider donating on Patreon. All of the funds will be used to help us enhance and design new articles and features for you. I'm Nathaniel, and until next time, keep us in your sights.